Hi everyone, and you are welcome along to our latest edition of the GAA Museum Book Club. So we've been reading this book, Unladylike by Hayley Kilgallon, for the last couple of months, and I'm delighted now after that to get a chance to chat to Hayley today. Hayley, you're very welcome.
Thanks very much, Julianne. Delighted to be here.
I really enjoyed the book, and there's a lot in it, so I have a lot of questions. I
Great.
suppose maybe we'll start by if you're telling us a little bit about yourself, and I suppose why it was you that took on the mantle of kind of delivering this first a comprehensive history on on ladies Gaelic football.
Yeah. So I guess in the first instance, like I have a huge interest in sport. I've been playing Gaelic football since I was about 12 years old. Grew up in a really sporty household. My dad played for Mayo and was involved in the Sligo backroom team when I was younger as well. So like from the beginning, interested in sport. And then it's been a huge part of my life, like in school, university. And when I went to university, I did a degree in history, and then I went on and did a master's in history. And it was then that I had to go and do some research on a dissertation. And it was the first time that you kind of had freedom to pick something that you wanted to research yourself. And I had gotten I'd done a module on sport history the year before. So that kind of started my interest. I was like, okay, there's more to history than wars and politics and all that kind of stuff. But it struck me then that I knew very little about the history of the LGFA. I was a bit embarrassed about that because I've been playing Gaelic football and a member of the LGFA. So I started then by doing a bit of research on the early years of the LGFA. And I was, as I said, I was embarrassed. I didn't know much about the LGFA's history. But when I went to do the research, I realised it wasn't actually my fault as such because there wasn't that much
There was
information.
no information. Yeah.
So started by looking at the early years, just kind of the first 10 years or so of the LGFA, how they got set up. And then had hoped that, I knew at that stage then there was way more into the history that you could go and way more research that you could do. So been lucky enough to be doing a PhD then over the last 3 years on ladies Gaelic football and kind of like the wider movement of women's sport in Ireland over the last 50 years.
Wow, because as you say, there hasn't been much, and I probably didn't know a whole lot myself. And it's quite a recent history as well. I know that there was a match played in 1920, but apart from that, a lot of the kind of, I suppose, meaty history is really from the 60s, 70s onwards. So how did you go about it? I suppose you're a historian by trade. Was it always the idea to do a book, or did that kind of come about during the process of the research?
Yeah, so I guess by how I went about doing the research was well, first of all, seeing what was out there. Have been lucky to have the support of the LGFA, so they put a call out to their members to help me source materials if people had things at home.
Brilliant.
Newspapers have been extremely helpful. So I spent a lot of time looking through the Irish newspaper archive just for any entry that might relate to ladies football. And then there's a bit of digging to do to figure out whether it was ladies Gaelic football they were playing or soccer. And then more contemporary sources on the history of the GAA and stuff like that. And I guess in terms of writing the book, knew when I was starting the PhD that there was a gap there, that a book hadn't been written on of the LGFA, and this year is the 50th anniversary of the founding of the LGFA. So the fact that they were supporting me in my PhD research and that this anniversary was coming up, it was kind of the intention that hopefully I would be long enough into my research at that stage that I would be able to put a book together and have it published this year to coincide with that anniversary and celebrate the 50 years and the journey they've been on over the last 50 years, which has had a lot of ups and downs over the last 5 decades.
And was there a panic at any stage? Did you think, I don't know if I'm going to get this book done?
It was certainly a really busy first half of the year. New Ireland published the book and they've been fantastic, but it was kind of early springtime when they came on board, and so we were keen to get it out around the time of the anniversary in the summer. So kind of had to put the foot down and the head down and make sure that everything was done in time. But yeah, it all came together, which is great.
Yeah, it's brilliant. So you must be delighted with the achievement. Did you do a lot of interviews? Because it is recent history, I suppose people involved in very important landmark moments are all still around. Was that useful for you?
Yeah, well, so I drew a lot actually on the GAA oral history interviews,
Yeah.
which have been done, I guess, kind of like in the last 10 years.
Mm.
They were really helpful because they had gotten a lot of the key members who had been involved, including one or two who had passed away since. So they were brilliant. And then through picking up different materials that people had, I did get a chance to speak to some other people who have been involved since the beginning as well. You know, because this is the first book, I think like there's lots of ways you could approach this, and I hope the books on the history of the LGFA in the future. But you could do a great book where you're really talking to the members and their experience. I guess the purpose of this book is to kind of give that overview of the 50 years and all the milestones.
Yeah, it's really a definitive guide, I suppose, to how the whole thing came about. And you were a historian by trade. Did you find kind of switching to that language that would be suitable for a commercial book tricky?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm very used to writing like academic style journal essays or putting together a conference paper that is going to be for a room full of historians. So yeah, the process of actually like writing and editing the book was fantastic, and worked with a brilliant editor. And I said that from the beginning. I was like, I know I need to tweak my language a bit so it's a bit more accessible. So I hope that comes across in the book and people can kind of relate to it.
It does, and the way it's even laid out, you know, the chapters are, you know, well, first of all, the cover is pretty cool. It's probably not like your usual history book, so it's very cool cover, and really pops on the shelf as well, which always helps. But I thought it was nice the way it was, like it was in chronological order, but it makes sense the way they were broken down. You obviously had the early years, then the 80s, the 90s when there was this big explosion, and then obviously the attendances start to grow in the 2000s. So yeah, like it was logical, but also there was a reason to have it in a logical way. I think it felt really good. I picked out a few kind of things from the book just to ask you a little more about. I suppose the opening line of the book is gas, with the letter from the farmer in Cork. Like, you couldn't make it up. Isn't it mad when you look back? What did you think when you came across that letter?
Yeah, I was absolutely shocked. Like, it was probably one of the first things I came across when I was doing my research. And just, well, first of all, the date was shocking to me, that it wasn't actually that long ago, like 1967. And his language is so strong. You know, he's really emphatic in that he doesn't think women should be in Croke Park, and that their place is at home, and it's revolting and unnatural, as he says, for women to
and not even to play, but to go to a match.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I often wonder what he would have thought then, like in 10 years time, when he saw women playing Gaelic football, or in 86 when women get into Croke Park, what was his view then? So like it's a really it's a great piece of material to showcase what some people thought about the position of women in our society at the time, and how that overlapped with sport.
And having said that, I loved the replies that you put the photo of all the replies in, and like there was men as well, you know, standing up for women. But there was some brilliant lines. Someone saying he was probably jilted by some lucky girl years ago, and so it was good. It's a good kind of social history of Ireland, and like obviously serious issues, but it's funny, I suppose, in some ways looking back now. How do you think, you kind of mentioned that it began really as a ladies' football matches in general began as novelty acts. How do you think, or why did it manage to move pretty quickly to a more serious, like, sport that was taken seriously by men and women?
Yeah, good question. I think, obviously it seems that it was entertaining to people. Like, so they were coming out to the matches because this was going to be like a bit of fun, see women play Gaelic football for the first time. And like, to be fair, that was a novelty. It wasn't a usual thing. You couldn't just go into your local GAA pitch and see women playing Gaelic football. But it seems that like the standard of the play, and that they were proving people wrong, that women actually could play Gaelic football matches and they could be entertaining to watch, not in a comical sense, but in a serious way. And the enjoyment that the players themselves were getting from it, that helps to move it on. And there's interest then amongst people who are playing and helping to organise the matches, and they realise that actually, as well as this, it's at this time where you're reconsidering the position of women in Irish society. Why shouldn't we have ladies Gaelic football teams? Like, why should it just be something that men do? And at the same time, like, women are breaking into other male-dominated sports like soccer and rugby. So it's part of this wider movement of women's sport as well.
And were Ireland kind of on par with other countries in Europe, or were they maybe a bit behind?
Yeah, no, fairly on par. It's at the early 1970s as well when soccer is taking off in Ireland and in parts of Europe and around the world. So yeah, I guess the difference is that the LGFA can't look to a Ladies Gaelic Football Association in another country for
Yes,
support.
true.
See how they're doing things. So they're very much on their own and they don't get support from the GAA in those early years. So the fact that they managed to organise and expand it into a national association is pretty impressive, I think.
Yeah, and you mentioned the GA there, and I know you deal with it in the book, but maybe talk to us a little bit about how the GA did slowly start to come around and how the relationship evolved between the two associations.
Yeah, so very much at the beginning, the GAA was quite sceptical of ladies Gaelic football. And founding members have spoken about how, in conversations they had with the GAA saw it as kind of a passing trend and that it would slowly fade away after a few years, that there would be something else women
Yeah.
would in. But they also held concerns like medical concerns, which was would have been held by other people in sport as well at the time, and was a reason why women weren't playing a lot of these sports before the 1970s. There was concerns about if a ball hit a woman in the chest, you could develop breast cancer. So they had these medical concerns, but then also they had, I guess, they already had a relationship with the Camogie Association, and it was very much felt that Camogie was a suitable sport for women to play. It's not as physical, or doesn't have the same kind of masculinity link that we would see with Gaelic football. So it's more appropriate for women to play that. And they were worried that if more people wanted to play ladies Gaelic football, Camogie would be affected. So it took a while. Like the LGFA did want to have a relationship with the GAA from the beginning, and they seek to set up some sort of a relationship, but they are skeptical. And it's not until the early 1980s that a committee is set up to examine this relationship. And still at this stage, the GAA are skeptical, and they don't come about this move themselves. They're prompted by county boards, men's county boards, putting motions to Congress looking for
Which
them.
is great.
It is brilliant, yeah. Like that, they're actually supporting ladies Gaelic football in their own counties. But it takes the LGFA kind of pushing back against the GAA a few times. The GAA say to them, "This is unladylike," and they say, "What are you to say that what's unladylike? Like, we're playing anyway." So then in 1982, they do give official recognition to the LGFA.
It's funny, as I was looking through everything, the like things that you don't really think about. There was a whole thing about sports bras and recommendations. Like it's mad even to think about things like that now being a consideration. Had you been aware of any of that before your research?
No, I hadn't. And yeah, it's something, I guess, as a woman in sport, you just take for granted. Like sports bras are part of the usual uniform. And like, in fairness, like Dr. Donald Keenan, who was the president of the GAA at the time, he established some link with a sports bra company in the US and got them shipped over so that the LGFA could trial them out. So he had these medical concerns, and there was no actual medical evidence to support these concerns, but we know nowadays that it is actually beneficial for women to wear sports bras. So maybe in ways he was kind of ahead of his time.
Helpful. Yeah, it was interesting, that whole thing. And I suppose then after the 80s then, and there was a bit of success in certain counties, and then actually my own county, Offaly, seemed to have been heavily involved, and there was loads of controversies in Offaly and everything, it seemed. You could talk to me a little bit about Offaly. Were banned one year for supposedly fielding an ineligible player.
Yeah, there was much confusion over this, and I think it was in an All Ireland semi-final. They suggested that they've fielded an ineligible player, but the player was previously registered with a different county, which seems to have been the confusion.
Okay.
But I think the story kind of grows legs, and at one stage people think it's a man who might have been registered to play, and it's not the case whatsoever. So yeah, these kind of like controversies, I think they shine a light a bit on how like the LGFA was just starting up, and dealing with these kind of things would have them, and a national association with. They can't look to another body for support either.
Yeah.
So like, you know, a lot of mistakes made maybe in the early years, but hopefully they're ones that they learn from. And it didn't seem to stop Offaly. They go on to win an All-Ireland
Eventually, yeah.
after.
Yeah, I didn't realise actually how involved Offaly were, because it was Camogie I played growing up, so not very well and to not very long. But yeah, it's interesting to see back now. Yeah, they were very involved, and Brendan Martin himself was from Offaly.
Yeah, exactly.
Talk to me then a little bit about the media, because that was a problem, media coverage and trying to get the media to give space, I suppose, over to ladies football. And how do you think that's changed? I suppose TG Cahir coming on board was a huge thing. But before that, had the newspapers started to accept ladies football?
Yeah, so I guess newspapers, and particularly local newspapers, really important. And you can see in some counties, local newspapers do really get behind and give good coverage to their county teams, especially when they're doing well. In terms of national newspaper coverage, then at certain times, like if there's, you know, in 1973 and 1974, when it's just starting off, they do make headlines in the papers. And then the story of Sister Pauline in 1977. Hogging out for an All-Ireland final, that makes headlines as well. But
which, because at the time there was nearly always a priest on most of the men's team, so it shouldn't have been that unusual that there was a nun.
That's true, yeah. But they only seem to kind of take interest when it's something kind of a bit novel again.
Yes.
So it's, yeah, I guess until then, the 1990s, you don't kind of seem to get like a strong, consistent newspaper coverage. And even then, like, you know, we know even still today, women's sports coverage is pales in comparison to men's sports coverage. And the LGFA speak out a lot about the lack of support that they're getting from the likes of RTE, whether that's on radio or television. So when they do get on television, 1998 is the first time the All-Ireland final is televised. That's a big breakthrough. And as you say, that partnership with TG Cahir in 2001 has been transformative, because, you know, they've got a deal now where they're going to show a consistent number of games over a consistent number of years. TG Cahir is a new channel as well, and they're trying to create like their own identity. And I think I quote Helen O'Rourke in the book, and she's saying that the fact that it's on television, parents are seeing it. So they're more likely then to send their daughters into play, and they see it as an exciting new emerging sport. So it comes across like real modern as well, I think. So it's really transformative in terms of the image of the LGFA.
Yeah, it's clever. I actually, when I began working, I was working in PR, and I worked for Bill O'Herlihy's agency, and they actually had the LGFA as a client at the time. And it was just at that time Monaghan were really prominent. It was Cora was playing for Mayo, so it was a real kind of exciting, the early 2000s. So exciting. I think it was the fastest growing sport in Europe at the time. So it was cool to be involved at that time. And I think as well the likes of Cora, the emergence of the new teams like Monaghan, it gave maybe kids all over the country someone to see on telly and to emulate.
Exactly. And the games then like were really exciting. You've kind of these rivalries setting up between like Waterford and Monaghan and Mayo and Galway. So teams and fans can get behind it as well, which is really important.
And then the book, I suppose, you deal with the 2000s and how it really exploded. Why do you think that is, and why have the attendances continued to grow? Is it, as you say, because it's seen as modern, fresh?
Yeah, like definitely the image helps it, but this doesn't happen by accident. I think the LGFA like recognize in the mid to late 1990s that they're growing really fast. Like at this stage, you know, you've got loads of counties coming on board. Say, for example, like in the Northwest and the north of Ireland, all those counties are coming on board in the 1990s. So the fact that they bring in a full-time employee in Helen O'Rourke in 1997, that is a huge turning point, because now they have someone there who can actually dedicate their time, and it seems like she put in 24 hours a day kind of work into the role in those early years as the only employee. It becomes a lot more strategic, their growth, and they can apply for funding and apply for assistance from the government or the Irish Sports Council and make those partnerships with the like of TG Cahir, and before that Bank of Ireland, and then Suzuki. Like these partnerships all come along that invest money in it as well, and give the LGFA money then to think about their strategy to grow their organization. So I think that explosion that happens in the 2000s is very strategic. It doesn't happen by accident, and it's thanks to the work that the organization does, like from the CEO right down to like the grassroots level, where they bring in different development officers.
Yeah, it was interesting kind of when you do see it, it kind of goes in decades, the evolution, doesn't it? Pretty much nearly exactly. And then you have the likes today of, I suppose, obviously the big attendances now at the All-Ireland finals. They're nearly to be expected now, which is brilliant. And then you've the evolution of things like Gaelic for Mothers and Others, which is really popular, and everyone on my Instagram seems to play except me.
Yeah.
So how important is that kind of social aspect of of the LGFA?
Yeah, I think it's incredibly important, and actually it's something I'd love to delve into a little bit more. I think I could probably have done a bit more research on it for the book, or certainly for my PhD, something I'm going to focus in a bit more on, because I guess the LGFA are fantastic in that they don't just offer opportunities for people to play competitive Gaelic football, but also this social Gaelic football, whether you are a mother or over whatever a certain age, or a young girl as well who's trying out the sport for the first time. They make it as kind of accessible as possible. And we know that women and girls drop out of sport at a greater rate to men. And I think like they have to be commended for the role that they're playing and giving women more opportunities. And it looks like brilliant crack. Like it seems to have expanded way beyond Ireland as well. You've got Gaelic for Mothers and Others in, I think, Barcelona and New York, which is so amazing. And I think it shows that it could be like a lifelong sport now for people.
Yeah, it's an interesting aspect of it. And you're talking about the social side. I meant to ask you about the Late Late Show piece that with Gay Byrne. I hadn't. Did you watch that back when you were doing your research?
Yeah, I was lucky enough to have a contact who got me the clip, and it's incredible. I'd heard someone in an interview mention it, and I went to RT and said, "Can I please have a look at this?" I think that was the late 1980s, 87 possibly. And the LGFA has been around since 1974, but there's still this
the lack of awareness of the rules, even.
Exactly. Or like that women could still be playing Gaelic football at this stage. So really interesting.
Yeah, I must root it out myself. It sounds, that is through the whole book, I suppose. Maybe the social evolution of Ireland kind of is in the background the whole time, and the change maybe in women's roles and society and outside the home and all of that. So it's an important social history as well as everything else.
Absolutely.
I just have a couple more questions. Sorry, I have millions. I suppose Helen O'Rourke, you mentioned, is a huge driving force. Did you sit down for a huge chat with Helen to get all her information? I'm sure like that was a huge resource for you.
Yeah, Helen's been great, like really supportive. So again, she did an interview with the GAA Oral History Project, which is fantastic.
Okay.
I would recommend like anyone, if you haven't gone looking through those oral history interviews, they're fantastic. They give such a widespread insight into the organisation of Gaelic games across Ireland and beyond. But she's been really instrumental in driving forward the LGFA, and kind of quietly so I would say as well.
Yeah, behind the scenes.
Yeah, but she's been involved like since the early 80s in Dublin, like on the county board. So she really like worked her way up. She knows the association really well, and is still so passionate about pushing forward ladies Gaelic football, which is fantastic.
And then another resource would have been all the photos. So I just picked out a couple. I'd say that was kind of fun. Because obviously we're more aware of the newer photos, but I picked out one of myself I found here of the Offaly team, which I thought was brilliant. I loved that photo. It's a great one, a double page. And then I thought this was quite cool as well. Hard to find it. I thought that was a good photo. Yeah.
I love that photo.
Did you have fun looking through the photo archives?
Yeah, and so a lot of those photos actually came from that call from the LGFA to people if they had stuff.
Right.
So they came from players from the early years, like 1974, 1975. They'd kept them at home, and like that photo of the three Tipperary players, I'd never seen before.
No.
don't think it featured in a newspaper. And I just love the, like, you can see the determination on their faces, but also maybe a bit of nervousness. And gives you a really nice snapshot before the throw in of the 1974 All Ireland, and maybe what was going through their heads. And the player who sent it to me, Mary Power O'Shea, as she described it, she said, "This is the full forward line talking tactics before throw in." So
brilliant.
Really nice. Yeah, really nice shot.
Yeah, they were a great addition to the book, and the layout is. Did you have much input into, I suppose, the layout and the look and feel of the book?
Yeah. So, like, as I mentioned, New Ireland are fantastic to work with. But yeah, I sourced the photos and like worked with the editor then to figure out the placement of them. And, like, was keen to get a nice spread as much as possible. Obviously some of the photos it kind of depended on what I was getting from people. So some counties might feature more heavily than others, but I tried to make sure that there was a good representation and that they'd linked in with the stories as well that are in each chapter.
Yeah, we found that sometimes in the museum, you might have one person in a county that's just kept everything and they're a huge resource, but then that can maybe it gives weight maybe to some other county. So it is, but there's often one person in a family or in a club that's brilliant for just having resources, and they love to be asked as well for them. And we have,
if any of your museum members actually have more items, like, I would love to people to reach out to me. I'd love to see more stuff.
Yeah. It's exciting. We have the exhibition at the moment as well. It's kind of on all the foundations, I suppose, of the sports of the future, and the ball from the first All Ireland is there. So that's kind of a nice link at the moment as well.
I've seen that. Brilliant. I think they've written the team out on the football as well, the names, which is fantastic. Really cool.
And we got it 3D scanned recently, so you're going to be able to see it online and turn it around and have a look at all the signatures. Yeah, it's cool. And then I suppose my final question is, I suppose, what has the reaction been to the book from, I suppose, those involved and then just the wider public?
Yeah, reaction has been good, which is great. Like, I'm delighted with that. I think the fact that it is the first book on the history of the LGFA, some people have been shocked by that, and like it gives people a chance to learn information they really didn't know before. Like, lots of people don't know the background to the setting up of ladies Gaelic football, or even things that have happened in more recent decades. I guess what I've enjoyed is, like, hearing from, say, like, even teammates of mine, they've been talking to their parents and their mother or their father talking about, oh yeah, I remember, like, this is how it was for me when I was playing, or I got involved with the team. So these kind of stories that maybe weren't shared before, people are talking about them now. And then I hope, anyway, this is what I'm hoping from the book, is that those who are involved in ladies Gaelic football maybe see themselves or their teams and clubs in the history, and that they might go on and celebrate their pioneers and their trailblazers in their history of the LGFA.
Yeah, and there's probably people who maybe even their families don't know of their involvement. It's just something they did. So it's lovely to have it all recorded now. And as you say, it's the first of history, so it'll always be a valuable resource now. And in 100 years' time, people will be looking back on it as reference. So huge congratulations! I hope it goes really well for you, and thank you so much for talking to us this morning.
No problem, and thank you so much for choosing the book for your book club as well. I hope your readers enjoyed it.
I'm sure they will. Thank you.